Picking up where we left off, I think we were somewhere around here. We did have the mixer open, and we were looking at 3 tracks. We had made some changes. We did some compression, we did some noise reduction, and now I want to show you a couple of other things. The first thing I want to do is open up this track a little bit more here. This is the dialogue track. And there are certain parts in this narrative. Again, this is chapter 3, Fellowship of the Ring, the Lord of the Rings, and Gandalf is talking to Frodo, and he's encouraging him to make a move, get out of the Shire, take that ring away. The bad guys are looking for it. But there's a certain number of things that are happening here in the narrative that I want to put some effects underneath or some music to enhance the storytelling. You'll notice there's a big gap here. We're going to deal with that. There's a little gap here and here. We're going to deal with that in a second too. Why don't we learn how to make some markers? So let's just sample this here.
Generally known, it would be worth a delay. But you must not delay too long. Or after our birthday, asked Frodo. I think I could probably make some arrangements by then.
Okay, so I think right around here, I want some new music to come in.
To tell the truth.
Yeah, because he ends his sentence and then the narrator comes back in. So with the playhead in this position right here, I'm going to click on this marker tab. Now you can see a marker was created here. And by the way, you can change the color of these markers too. I'm just going to keep it at the default blue. And then I'm going to put my pointer over it and double click there. And it pulls open this panel where I can label this marker. And I'm going to say add music bed. And it's going to give me the timestamp of where I'm asking that marker to live. And now I've created this marker, but to see what's on it, you can do this again. You can double click again. But there's also a record of this now up in the index tab. So let's click on the index tab up here, and then it probably will default to edit index, and then there's a tracks, and then there's a marker section here. So let's click on the marker section here. So now you can see this marker is here, and now you can see it says add music bed at that timestamp. Now, if I click here, the playhead is going to go automatically to that marker. So when we have a list of markers here, I can just click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll get to that point where I want to do the action that I want to do here. So it's pretty handy to have these things to guide you throughout your editing process. I think also
privately made up his mind to leave on was uppermost in his mind.
Yeah, we're going to leave it, the music, and the music's going to fade out.
See that Sam Gamgee does not talk.
Here.
If he does, I really shall turn him into a toad.
And so the music came in here, and we're going to fade it here. So I'm just going to put another, and now I can go right over here and double click right here and end music bed. Okay, so I've got 2 in and out points there, and let's just scrub ahead.
The wind. Quickly and quietly they slipped off the path.
Okay, so now they have left the Shire, and Frodo is with Sam and Merry and Pippin.
They stopped suddenly and stood as silent as tree shadows, listening. There was a sound of hoofs in the lane.
Okay, so right there, there's a sound of hoofs, and this time I'm going to make it yellow. And I'm going to sound FX hoofs or hooves.
There was a sound of hoofs in the lane, some way behind, but coming slow and clear down the wind. Quickly and quietly they slipped off the path and ran into the deeper shade under the tree.
So they're running away from the bad guys.
But there was no moon. The sound of hooves stopped.
And there's some more hooves here. So Let's see. Let's call this hooves end.
As Frodo watched, he saw something dark pass across the lightest space between two trees. He had realized what he was doing. His hand was groping in his pocket. It was stronger than before.
He feels this desire to put on the ring.
Once more, the desire to slip on the ring came over Frodo, but this time it was stronger than before.
And this is a serious part in the passage because Gandalf warns him over and over, don't put on the ring, don't use the ring. So I think I want to add some kind of dramatic stinger or music there, and I'll note that with purple. And I'll just call that dramatic.
So strong that almost before...
Okay, and then just as the bad guys almost trying to catch him,
with the voices, if they had not pulled him back,
they hear the
shadowy horse.
They hear some elves singing, coming up the path.
Breathed again. Elves!
And you remember that part, I'm sure.
Yes, it is elves, said Frodo.
So this is where the elves come in. Why don't we call this one lavender? And here we go. Elves singing. And we'll keep this big gap.
The song ended.
And that's where the song ends. I don't know that we need to make a label there. I know that it's going to end right around there. I'm just demonstrating the idea of using them. The elves stop, the elves see them, the elves stop, and they address them.
And looked toward the hobbits and laughed. Hail, Frodo! You are abroad late. Or are you perhaps lost? Then he called aloud to the other.
Okay, so one of the elves speaks out loud to them, and I want to make this section here sound like they're outdoors in the woods. So I'm going to actually put an out point here by striking the key O, and then come back to this point where he first laughs and hit the I key for an in point. So now I have this in and out point here, and I'm going to use the scissor or the razor tool. Looks like a pair of scissors here, and I'm going to click there. So I've now made a razor cut right there. You can see now these two clips are separated. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Now also, there's another way to do this, and it's Command B for blade. And I'm going to go back up to my tools here, and I'm going to grab the pointer tool, and I'm going to click on this little clip that I've cut out, and I'm going to actually drag it down, and you can see another audio track was created with just that clip on it.
Hail, Frodo! You are abroad late.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a little bit, but now we have this new track. Let's actually take a moment to label it. I'll call it Elf Outdoors. If I put anything else on this track, it'll be the elves talking outdoors. And now I'm going to just, for a moment, close this panel here. And now we can see we've got some markers here, things that we want to do. Okay, so let's go back and why don't we close the mixer for now? We don't need it. So let's open up the media pool, and we're going to go into our sound effects. And one thing I'm going to do right away is, after the crow's end, Gandalf and Frodo are actually inside, sitting in front of a fireplace. So I'm going to take the fireplace sound effect, and I'm going to bring it and drag it over to this area, and it's going to create its own track there. See, it's kind of creating audio track number 5. So I'm just going to drop that down in there and expand it a little bit, open it up just a tiny bit. Go back up to my pointer 2. And I want this to kind of come in and fade in just as the crows end. So I'm going to create a kind of a long fade there.
2 or 3 weeks had passed, and still Frodo had made no sign of getting ready to go. I know, but it's difficult to do both, he objected. If I just vanish like Bilbo, the tale will be all over the Shire in no time. Of course you mustn't vanish.
Let's name that track Fireplace SFX. And now when we go back and open the mixer, first let's close the media pool and we'll go back and open the mixer. Now you open the mixer and wow, where is that track? And you have to slide this guy over or expand this out to see all the tracks. But now you can see that this track has been created, as has the Elf Outdoors track has been created. So now we have some control over this track in the mixer.
Shh, said Gandalf.
It's actually a little loud, so I'm going to bring it down here.
That wouldn't do it all. I said soon, not instantly. If you can think of any way of getting out of the Shire without it being
now it's sitting underneath the narrative really nicely.
Generally known, it will be worth a delay. But you
we haven't added any music yet, so let's do that now. Go back into the media pool and go into music beds, and there's some, let's see, what is this? Oh, yeah, that's gonna be the start here. We're gonna add that music bed. It's very dramatic and it will fit really well to what he's starting to say there. So let's grab this. And we do have a music bed track. Let's put it up there just so we don't have to create another one. And now it should sound like this.
What about the autumn? I'll probably make some arrangements by then. To tell the truth, he was very reluctant to start, now that it had come to the point. Bag End seemed a more desirable residence than it had for years.
Yeah, I'm liking that. But I'm going to take the volume down on this, and I'm not going to do it over here because I've got other music on here, and I don't want to impact that. I just want to impact this. So I'm going to hover the pointer over this yellow line here until it becomes an up and down arrow, and then just pull it down.
And he wanted to savor as much as he could then. To tell the truth, he was very reluctant to start, now that it had come to the point.
Now this is where it sort of ends.
Gamgee does not talk. If he does, I really shall turn him into a toad.
All right, it goes on too long, and I want the ending to be about here.
Shall turn him into a toad.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay, so I'm going to pull it back just a little bit more so that when he says toad, we hear that percussion.
I really shall turn him into a toad.
Just one beat this way.
I really shall turn him into a toad.
Okay, so that means we have to do something at the front here. Let's create some more real estate for us by closing the media pool. I could close the mixer right now as well. So this starts a little too early now.
What about the autumn? On or after our birthday? Asked Frodo. I think I could probably make some arrangements by then.
So what I'll do here is shorten this by grabbing the end here and pulling this way and then fading it in. So let's see what I get now.
Birthday, asked Frodo. I think I could probably make some arrangements by then. To tell the truth, he was very reluctant to stop.
Okay.
Now that it had come to the point. Bag End.
That's great. The music bed is lying theoretically underneath the narrative track. I know it's on top here. Well, you know what? We can actually move that. Let's take this and move the track down. Okay, now it is physically underneath as well as theoretically.
Seemed a more desirable residence than it had for years.
And then when this ends,
talk. If he does, I really shall turn him into a toad.
Perfect. Okay, so what do we have here? Oh, the hooves. Okay, so now let's deal with the fact that they're out on the path. They hear some hooves. The bad guys are chasing them.
They stopped suddenly and stood as silent as tree shadows, listening. There was a sound of hoofs in the lane, some way behind.
Okay, back to the media pool. And as you can see, this marker is telling us there's hoofs, but also we're hearing it in the narrative. So sometimes you don't need the markers. They're not absolutely necessary. I just want you to know they're there. And now that we're going back into the media pool, we're going into the SFX bin. And this is animal horse. This is animal horse. Let's sample this one. That one sounds like he's riding by. Yeah, I like this one better. So we're going to take this guy and we're going to drag it into this area and we're going to create yet another track. Starting to get very sophisticated with our editing.
There was a sound of hoofs in the lane, some way behind, but coming slow and clear down the wind. Quickly and quietly.
That's pretty good, and I like the volume that way. I'm going to open this up just a little bit and just take it down just a tad.
Silent as tree shadows, listening. There was a sound of hoofs in the lane, some way behind, but coming slow and clear down the wind. Quickly and quietly they slipped off the path and ran into the deeper shade under the trees. Don't let us go.
Okay, so what happens here?
Hooves stopped.
The hooves stop here. So what we could do is highlight this and hold down the Option key and drag out from that clip, and you can duplicate that clip. The other way of doing this is to highlight this clip, hit Command C, and then place the pointer in another area and hit Command V. Whoops. And it went over there. Okay, I thought it was going to end up with the playhead. But either way, now you have duplicated that same clip. I don't need this one any longer. So now that it's highlighted red, I'm going to hit the delete key. And I have the duplicate over here. But I don't want it to sound exactly like this one because the hooves stop.
Tree bowl. The sound of hooves stopped.
Let's see if I can manipulate this track in a way that it makes it sound naturally that the hooves are stopping.
Sound of hooves stopped.
That's almost where I clipped it to is almost okay. Let's just put a little fade on it.
The sound of hooves stopped.
Okay.
As Frodo watched, he saw something dark.
And there's too much of a gap here. So what we're going to do is go back up to our tools and we're going to click on the range mode tool. And now we are going to grab this section right here and I'm going to hit Shift and delete. And I created what's called a ripple delete. We've done that in another lesson, but I have clipped it here, taken the silence out, and it took the rest of the clip and slammed it back to the left and connected it all together.
As Frodo stopped. As Frodo watched, he saw something dark pass across and then halt.
All right, now at some point Frodo tries to put on or feels like he should put on the ring. I think that's here. Again, let's close Media Pool for a second, go into Index and click here. And that is, this is where he tries to put on the ring. I want some kind of dramatic music there or something like that. So let's go back to, let's close Index. So all we have are the bins. And let's go back to Music Bed. And let's sample this guy here. Let's put Epic Drama Sleek up here. Yeah, I'm far into that file too, so it actually starts way here. It's kind of mild. Yeah, I'm liking that. So I'm going to put an out point here by hitting my O key, and I'm going to come back. That looks like a good spot. Yeah. Right before that crescendo there, and I'm going to put an in key here. And now I'm going to take this and bring it over, and I think I'll put it with the crows.
Once more, the desire to slip on the ring came over Frodo, but this time it was stronger than before. So strong that almost before he had realized what... Once more, the desire to slip on the ring came over Frodo, but this time it was stronger than before. So strong that almost before he had realized what he was doing, his hand was groping in his pocket. But at that moment there came a sound like mingled song and laughter.
Okay. Not ideal, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my pointer tool, drag it this way a little bit, fade it in and fade it out.
Bent to the ground and then began to crawl towards him. Once more, the desire to slip on the ring came over Frodo, but this time it was stronger than before. So strong that almost before he had realized what he was doing, his hand was groping in his pocket. But at that moment there came a sound like mingled song and laughter. Okay, so this is where the elves come and they start singing.
So I don't think I put a marker on that. Oh, I did. Here it is. All right. So actually, I don't want it there. I want a little bit more here because he's saying they're on their way. This is a file that is going to kind of be the elves singing. So I'm going to take this and we're going to put that on track number 6.
But at that moment there came a sound like mingled song and laughter. Clear voices rose and fell in the starlit air. The black shadow straightened up and retreated. It climbed onto the shadowy horse and seemed to vanish across the lane into the darkness on the other side.
Now we can take a moment now that we've put this elf track kind of in place. I'm not really exactly sure that's where it's going, but the footsteps of the horse or the horse starts to, the dark rider goes away and
it climbed onto the shadowy horse.
So why don't we do that again with the hooves? And here we go. Let's go with this one. I think this one sounds like It's more like a giddy up type of thing. And we'll put that also with the crows there.
And retreated. It climbed onto the shadowy horse and seemed to vanish across the lane into the darkness on the other side. Frodo breathed again. "Elves!" exclaimed Sam in a hoarse whisper. "Elves!"
All right. Now we have to make this match up. So the elves are going to sing us through this space right here. We have to bring this up gently. So there's a couple of ways to do that. We could drag in like this. Let's see how that sounds.
There came a sound like mingled song and laughter. Clear voices rose and fell in the starlit air. The black shadow straightened up and retreated. It climbed onto the shadowy horse and seemed to vanish across the lane into the darkness on the other side. Frodo breathed again. "Elves!" exclaimed Sam in a hoarse whisper. "Elves, sir!" He would have burst out of the trees and dashed off toward the voices if they had not pulled him back. "Yes, it is elves," said Frodo.
Overall, too loud. And we need to make some adjustments here because I can tell this ends. It needs to end here.
The song ended.
Yeah, so this has to go kind of out to here.
The song ended.
I'm just going to pull it back just a little bit more. And I'm going to pull this fade back to here.
Lit air. The black shadow straightened up and retreated. It climbed onto the shadowy horse and seemed to vanish across the lane.
All right, I think it's
The
better.
trees and dashed off toward the voices if they had not pulled him back. "Yes, it is elves," said Frodo.
Okay. I think it's going to play out really nicely.
The song ended. "These are high elves."
Wonderful. Now, here we come to the part where the elf addresses the group, and we want to make it sound like they're outside. We got a lot of tracks here now. This is going to get confusing. We've got the fireplace. We've got the elf outdoors. We got the music. We got crows. I didn't even name this track. And because we made a cut back here, we didn't take this with us. I don't know if that's clear or I'm making that clear, but back here we made that blade cut and it drew everything this way, but we were not bringing this with us. So this kind of created a gap right here. So a couple of things we can do here. One of the quickest, easiest things to do is with your pointer mode, grab both of these. They turn red on the outside, and then you can just pull them this way.
He turned and looked toward the hobbits and laughed. "Hail, Frodo!"
Okay, so it looks like that overlaps just a little bit, so I'm going to pull it back out here.
"You are abroad late, or are you perhaps lost?" Then he called aloud to the others.
So I want to make this sound like they are outdoors. So I'm going to close the media pool, open up the mixer again, and remember that there's more tracks here than can be seen in this view. So I'm going to stretch this out so that I can see the tracks. And I want to be on Elf Outdoors, and I am. And I'm going to add an effect right here. So I click on this plus button here, and then I'm going to go to reverb. And you will see Fairlight effects here. You probably won't see this. You'll probably only see that. And it may just go right straight to the reverb, but this is what you want. And when you open that up, this effects panel opens up right here. And it's very interesting. Watch what we do here.
Hail, Frodo! You are a broad lake.
Now that just sounds like they're in some big old room. So by default, it selects a reverb for you. And there's a bunch of different things you can do here. Do not get overwhelmed by this stuff. You can play around with this and learn what these things do, how they change and shape the sound. But also I want you to know that up here in this little drop-down box, there are some other choices. So there's a concert hall. Let's just see what that sounds like.
Or are you perhaps lost?
There is a bathroom.
Hail, Frodo! You are a broad lake.
And you can see that this little shape in here changes when you change these presets. And this is actually representational of space or a room, and you can actually change this while you're playing it back.
You are a broad lake. Or are you perhaps lost?
Now, I am going to go back up here and I'm going to just choose small theater.
Hail, Frodo!
And I'm going to change the pre-delay a little bit.
Hail, Frodo! You are a broad lake. Or are you perhaps lost?
And I'm going to mess with this dial a little bit, the distance.
Hail, Frodo! You are a broad lake.
Okay, as you can see, there are many, many different granular controls for the reverb. I don't think I have it dialed in exactly the way I want it for the outdoors. You do not have to have it dialed in that way either. I just wanted you to be able to use the effect, see the panels open up, understand some of these controls here. I encourage you to play around with them, mess around with them, see what you get. It's okay if it doesn't sound great, like it's really outdoors. It's okay if it sounds like in a cathedral when you pass it back in, and that'll be fine. So I'm going to close out this effects panel. Just know that it still lives there. See, now we have it right here, reverb. We can turn it on and off by hitting this bypass button. We can go back in to look at the controls of it. We can turn it off here if we want. We have all kinds of flexibility. This is what's called non-destructive editing. We can go back and change it in the future if we want. And I think that is probably a really good place to stop.